Good morning, y'all. So good to be here. Hey, if you don't know me, my name's Chase. I am a husband. I'm a dad of two awesome boys. But one of those awesome boys sometimes is not so awesome. I have a 3-year-old. His name is Miles. If you ask my mom, he's perfect and never messes up at all in any way. But she doesn't have to put him to bed every night like I do. And that has been the worst recently. But I think it's just in a part of him to want to control everything. He wants to control what he eats, when he takes a nap, when he doesn't take a nap, what PJs he gets to wear, what shirt he gets to wear. If you saw him walk in this morning, he had on Monster Jam. I promise, my wife didn't pick that out. He just loves monster trucks. But he just wants to control everything. And a lot of times it sends him into this fit of rage. Literally last night he was jumping up and down on his bed screaming that he didn't want to go to sleep. And it's the most frustrating part of my day, every day right now. But as I look at him, he does share my genetics, and so he probably does get some things from me. And there is a lot of me in him, sadly, and a lot of the bad things that I see in myself, I see in him sometimes. And controlling things in life is a big struggle for me a lot of times. I remember growing up, whenever I would practice or whenever I would, be getting ready for a game, and my dad would try to throw in a little suggestion of oh, maybe you need to try to hold your bat this way or do this thing. I'd be like, Dad, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm just going to do it my way. And I now understand why my dad got so angry when I said those things, because my son says those same things to me, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm just going to do it this way. And as I look at my life now, I never really fully grew out of that. Now, I don't throw big toddler tantrums most of the time anymore, but I do still have the sense of I just want to control everything. I want to have some control. When life gets hard, whenever money gets tight, I got to find a way to hustle and make a few more dollars. When there's not enough time to do all the things that I want to do, I got to adjust my calendar, and I have to fix it the way that I want to fix it. Whenever things aren't going exactly how they seem to go, I have to learn how to steer the ship in the right direction. And what has kind of happened for me and what I can see looking back is control isn't just a vice for me. It's something that has become a point of worship for me. Controlling things is something that I've put my trust into. And that is really what worship is when we put our trust into something enough that we let it run our life. And maybe it's not control, maybe it's success, right? Maybe it's, having the highest paid position in your company. Maybe it's not success, maybe it's admiration from people around you. You want people to pat you on the back. You want people to say that I love you, that I'm your friend. There's a lot of different places that we place our trust in our life. But if we're not ultimately putting our trust into things that are bigger than this world, then what are we really doing? Does it even really matter all that much? See, I think a lot of times the things that we worship are just things that are here for a minute and gone. Even in our own life, the Bible says is like a mist in the wake of eternity. That it's just here for a second and it's gone. But so often we choose to worship ourselves, to worship things that make my life easier or my life better or make me look good. And so what I want to look at this morning together is a story in Daniel that you've probably heard a bunch of times. If you grew up in church, you definitely heard it maybe once a month in Sunday school. I feel like we talked about this all the time because it's a crazy, cool, powerful, courageous story. We're going to talk about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, okay? If you don't know this story, there's this fiery furnace. They stand in the face of danger, and they're courageous, and they're awesome, and they win, and everyone's life has changed, and it's all awesome and cool. But I think what truly lies at the heart of this story, and what you're going to see this morning, hopefully, is that it wasn't their courage that got them through this trial. It was what they worshiped and what their heart was really turned towards and aligned with. And so before we get into the story, I want to give you a little bit of setup into where we're going. There's this king, his name is Nebuchadnezzar, which I think is just like the coolest name for a king ever. I don't know, it just sounds powerful. I don't know, maybe it's just because it's memorable, because it's so different. But Nebuchadnezzar, I've always liked that name. But anyway, Nebuchadnezzar has this dream, and he's trying to decide if this dream is legit, if it's true, if it's revealing something about himself. And so he tries to find people to interpret his dream. But when they're trying to interpret, he's like, I'm actually not going to tell you the dream. You have to tell me the dream and then also interpret it. And all these people are like, yeah, that's impossible, bro. It's in your mind. How can I know what your dream was? But then Daniel comes along, and he has a dream about the dream, and then he interprets the dream, and all of these things. Anyway, he tells Nebuchadnezzar, hey, what you've seen is real and true. That there's this statue of you in your dream, and at the top is your head, and the head is made of gold. And what that means is that your kingdom is going to be the best kingdom. Your kingdom is going to be the greatest. People are going to remember your name, and it's going to be so good. But then there's going to be other kingdoms that come after you. So the statue is made of different materials. So there was gold at the top. Nebuchadnezzar was going to be the best king. People were going to remember Babylon as the greatest kingdom, and it was all going to be awesome. And then underneath it, there was like some silver and some bronze and some iron on the feet and all these things. And Nebuchadnezzar hears this dream, and he's like, I knew it. I knew that God wanted me to be the best. I'm the best. I'm the greatest. And Nebuchadnezzar turned his heart of worship towards himself. He heard this dream, and he heard the confirmation that he was the best, that he was above, that his kingdom was the greatest, and he ran with it. And so that's where we're going to pick up in Daniel chapter 3 together this morning. Starting in verse 1, it says this. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high, and 60 cubits wide. It's about 90 feet. And he set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image that he had set up. So all these people and their important names assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshiped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Now, here's what's interesting about the beginning of this story, is that Nebuchadnezzar heard a truth from God. He heard something that was true about himself. That his kingdom was going to be great, that he was going to do good things, that it was going to be remembered as the best. But he decided that that wasn't enough for him. He decided that like being the best kingdom of like all these kingdoms that were to come after him just wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to just be good and to be remembered and all of these things. He wanted to be all of it. He wanted his kingdom to never end. And so I can only imagine, the Bible doesn't like explicitly tell us why Nebuchadnezzar decided, you know what, I'm just going to make the whole thing out of gold. But it feels like a rejection of God's truth a little bit. It feels like a rejection of what God really said about him, because Nebuchadnezzar didn't want to hear that he was just going to be the best kingdom. He wanted to hear that he was going to be the kingdom. That it was all going to go through him. That everything was going to be great because of what he had done. And so he builds this entire statue out of gold, almost as this stamp of rebellion, to say that, God, my truth matters more than what you've said to me. Hey, God, that's cool that you want me to be the best king, that you want me to be remembered, but my truth matters more. what I believe, what I see about myself, that's actually what's true. So I'm going to build this whole statue out of gold, and I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to do it how I want to do it because I know better than you. How many of us have been there before? Maybe you've never said that out loud. Like, I think that would be really kind of scary for me to say that, God, I'm better than you. That feels terrifying to say because I know it's not really true. But come on, how many times have we been in the face of a hard moment and we think, God, I can fix this. God, this is my mistake. It's my marriage. It's my financial struggles. It's my kids. It's my job. It's my schoolwork. God, I can figure this out. I've got this on my own. Or, God, you're taking too long. God, I've been asking you for this over and over and over again. God, we've been struggling with this for years. God, we're trying to do what you've called us to do. We want to be good parents, but God, you're not letting me have children. I don't understand. God, I'm just going to do it my own way. If you're not going to help me, God, I've been asking you to help, to bless me. God, I want to have more money. I've been faithful. I've been tithing. God, I want my bank account to grow, but if you're not going to do it, I'm just going to go do it on my own. How many times in life do we just try to figure it out for ourselves? And it's never with a mouth that says, God, I'm better than you, but our actions say that we think we are. What we turn to, what we run to, what we give ourselves over to, what we worship, it changes who we are. And it changes the things that we do. And what Nebuchadnezzar was worshiping wasn't the God who gave him all this power in the first place. He started to worship himself. He started worshiping this idea that he was better than everything that God had promised him. Like, oh God, you promised me a great kingdom. God, I'm actually going to show you how great I really am. And if everyone else doesn't believe it, I'm just going to shut them up. I'm going to throw them in a furnace. I'm going to be done with them. And it says here at the end of the story that people all over the place fell down and they worshiped that statue. But if you know the story, that's where our three guys come in. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they don't bow down and worship Nebuchadnezzar. They actually work in the Babylonian government at the time. And they're like, he's not the king. He's a king. He's the king of this land, but he's not my king. He's not the king of kings. He's not above my God. And so they don't fall down and worship. And Nebuchadnezzar even gives them another chance. They get brought in front of Nebuchadnezzar, and he's like, listen, we're going to play some more music, and we're going to do this again, and you better worship. Or you see that furnace over there? You're going in it. It's happening. This wasn't like some rumor that like, oh, there's a furnace like in the back room, but he doesn't actually take anybody in there. Like, they're looking at it. They're standing there. And they don't worship. They don't bow at this meaningless golden statue. And in verse 13 it says this, furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king. Nebuchadnezzar said to them, it's true that you don't serve my gods or worship the image of gold I've set up. Now when you hear the sound of the music, if you're ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you'll be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God that we serve is able to deliver us from it. And he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he doesn't, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold. that you have set up. Wow. Right? Wow. They're standing in the face of death in front of the one person who feels like can save them right now. And they say, hey, I don't care what you say. Throw me in the fire. Because I know that my God is big enough to get me out of it. But here's what I think is awesome about this story. Is they say, but even if he doesn't, we want you to know that we will not serve your gods. Their worship was not dependent on the outcome of the story. Their worship of God, how they thought of God, where God landed in their hearts, did not depend on if they lived or if they died. They knew that no matter what happened on this earth, that God was still on the throne, that he was still the King of Kings. And that doesn't just happen because they're like defiant teenagers, that they're trying to like stand up to the man. That comes from a lifetime of worship of a true king. That comes from a lifetime of surrender. It comes from a lifetime of stories of hearing about how God had saved their people from the hand of their enemies. It's not just a lifetime of believing that God is real. It's not just a lifetime of showing up and checking off the boxes and answering the questions that your mom asked you at the dinner table. It's from a lifetime of trust, putting their trust and their hope into the one thing that they know the world cannot overcome. And that is the God of the universe sitting on his throne. See, the furnace, it didn't create faith. It revealed their worship. And I think that's what is important to see here, is that it didn't create a moment for them to just stand up and be faithful. It did that for them, that they got to stand up and say, God, I have faith that you are good. What it did was revealed the worship of their life. That the thing that they cared about the most was being laid on the line. They said, I'm not putting that down just because you're going to say I'm being put to death. They spent a lifetime dedicated to this God that they loved. And because of their worship of him, their faith grew to a point where they could stand in the face of death and say, I don't care what you do to me. Because my God is stronger than this furnace. And that is where you see their belief, is to say that God is able to deliver me from this. That is a strong faith, and that is good belief. But I really think their worship of him is revealed when they say, but even if he doesn't. To me, that is the heart of worshiping God. Is that we don't just run to him when he's doing good things for us. We don't just run to him when he's making life perfect and when life is all good and it's all going exactly how we think that it should be going. It's that we still trust him even when he doesn't do it how we want him to do it. Even when it doesn't go exactly according to our plan. Even when he doesn't heal the sickness. Even when he doesn't give you the house that you've always wanted. Even when he doesn't bless you with all the kids that you think you deserve. Even when your kids are being defiant and you don't know how to parent them and make them just go to bed because they need sleep. He says, but even if he doesn't, we will still not worship your gods. And I wonder how many of us can say the same thing this morning. How many of us can truly say that, God, even if you don't, I'm not going to run to anything else? How many times do we turn to ourselves, to relying on our own skills, our own gifts, our own spouse, our job, our boyfriend, our girlfriend, our work, our schoolwork, that sport, that team? How often do we turn to those for our joy when life gets hard? You would not believe how many times I ask high schoolers, like, hey, how do you deal with like anxiety? Like if you're down and you're sad, like what do you kind of do with yourself? Like what do you do? And I'm gonna say 90% of the time, that's just a random number I pulled out of my head, but it just feels right. It's a lot that they say, oh, I've got a playlist. I've got these songs that I've like curated for myself that just make me feel good. And it kind of makes the world disappear a little bit. And how many times do we curate a playlist for ourselves? Maybe it's not actual music. Maybe it's going to the backyard and working in the garden. Maybe it's going out in the woods and sitting in a deer stand all day. Maybe it's going and sitting and having a drink with your friends. But we have these things that we tend to escape to, that we run to before we ever run to God. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily all bad things. I'm sure their playlists are great and fun and maybe worshipful. But if we're relying on the things that we create for ourselves, the things that we want to do on our own before we rely on God, then when we face the furnace of life, when the heat gets turned up, we're going to falter. Because we're going to say, you know what, I can just turn to you in this moment because you're saying you're going to make it okay. But the true heart of their faith and their worship is revealed when they say, but even if he doesn't give me life, I'm not going to worship anything else. How many of us feel like we can truly say that this morning? And this is what happens in the story. It says, then Nebuchadnezzar was furious, and his attitude toward them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual. And he commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. And the king's command was so urgent, and the furnace was so hot, that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement, and he asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw them into the fire? And they replied, certainly, Your Majesty. And maybe you've heard the rest of this story before and you know where it's going. But I just want to sit here for a moment with you and think about the mindset that Nebuchadnezzar has right now. He's sitting there and he's like, I told him what was going to happen. All they had to do was fall down and worship me, say that their God isn't as good as I am. And I got them. We tied them up. I got my strongest guys. They're not getting loose. I turned my furnace up to a point where people standing outside of the furnace are also dying. This is it. They're done for. I've won. I've done it. And then he looks up and he sees this curious scenario playing out. And I can imagine where his mind is probably going. Of like, I thought that I had this figured out. I thought that I was the strongest. I thought that I was the best. But he's looking into this furnace and he sees something unusual. Because the people on the outside have already died. And so if he's looking into the furnace, they should just either be on the floor or just be completely burned up at this point, honestly. But he looks and he says, wasn't there only 3? In verse 25, he said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed. And the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and he shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego come out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. And they saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Nebuchadnezzar looked into the fire, and he sees something so unusual that not only were the three men that he threw in there standing up, walking around, probably sweating a little bit, if we're going to be honest, but there was 4 people in the furnace. There was a 4th man in the fire, just like we just sang. There was someone standing in there with them. And I can only imagine what's going through Nebuchadnezzar's mind. Oh no. Oh no. I messed up. God told me I was going to be great, but he also told me that I wasn't forever. And he's looking into this fire, and he sees what he calls the Son of the Gods. Some people say it's like a pre-incarnate Jesus standing in the fire. Maybe it's just an angel. The Bible doesn't really say exactly who it is. But God sends someone into this fire with these 3 men and says, basically, thank you for being faithful. Thank you for your trust. We're going to get you out of this. And I wish I could hear the thoughts of their minds as they walk into that furnace. Like, were they a little bit nervous? Probably. Was it probably pretty scary when they saw the flames get bigger and bigger as they turned it up hotter and hotter? Probably. But there was something in them, a lifetime of worship that led them to this moment to say, you know what? I don't care what they do to me. My God is bigger than this. And maybe it was a mindset of, you know what? If this is the end for me, at least I get to see him in eternity. And sometimes that's all the hope that we get. Is that if this is the end for me, if this is the end for a loved one, this life here is not what I'm truly living for anyway. And I think that's where this idea of worship comes into play for them, is that they realized this is not the life that I was built for. God designed us in the beginning of time to live in relationship with him. And we screwed it up because we said that we knew better. And it started with this idea of rejecting that what God said, is it really true? Like when the serpent comes up and he tempts Eve, he said, did God really say that? She's like, you know what? Maybe not. Maybe he doesn't fully know what he's talking about. Maybe he is trying to hide something. So before sin ever was breaking one of God's commands, it was really rejecting that he is true. Like, we see sin as breaking these rules and doing these bad things, but in reality, sin starts in your heart. It starts with the idea that maybe God doesn't fully know what he's talking about. Maybe I do know a little bit better. Maybe this thing sounds and looks a little bit sweeter right now in this moment. But these 3 guys have this heart of worship, a heart that is aligned with God's heart that says he is bigger and better than anything else that the world could have to offer them. And the world tried to bind them up. And the world tried to hold them down. And the world tried to end it all for them. And they get thrown into the furnace. And I think what's interesting is that there's only one thing in the furnace that burns up, and it's the ropes. The thing that they got tied up with, God used this furnace to burn what the world thought would bind them. He used this hardship. He used this thing that looked impossible to overcome, and he used it to get rid of the one thing that was holding them down. And I wonder what you are facing right now that God is trying to loosen something in your life up. That he's trying to cut some binds off. He's trying to burn something away so that you can step out into a fresh light and understand that he is bigger than us. That his kingdom is incomprehensible, that he does things that we don't always understand, and that he reveals himself in ways that maybe don't always make sense, and that's not always exactly how we thought it was going to go. But the one thing that was binding them is the one thing that the furnace burned. It didn't burn them. It didn't harm them. They came out better. And I think that they were able to walk out of there better because of their faith and their worship going into it. So if we don't fix our heart posture now, if we don't begin our worship, if we don't lay at the feet of Jesus every day, then when life gets hard, not if, but when life gets hard, it's going to feel like our hands are tied behind our back and we can't do anything about it. But these things, these trials that we go through, the things that the world throws at us that try to hold us down, God says, if you will just walk into the furnace, I'm going to be in there with you. And the thing that you think is holding you down is going to get burned away. And you're going to come out even stronger. And your faith on the other side of it is going to be even bigger. But it begins with our posture towards God and towards the rest of the world. If we're worshiping things other than God, then facing the furnace becomes impossible. So many of us have faced so many tragic situations. But when we stand on the other side of it and people wonder, how are you okay? Sometimes the answer is, I don't know if I am okay. But I think truly the answer is the only reason that we can stand up to anything in this life is because of the reality of the gospel. The fact that Jesus came and defeated death in the grave. That we serve a God who is beyond our comprehension, and that ultimately this life is not our goal. Living a good life on earth is fine. But ultimately our goal is eternity with our King. And that comes from what we do here, our decision to follow him, our decision to say that he is better than all things, that he is true, that he is real, that we believe that the life of Jesus was perfect and that his death covered our sins and that he resurrected to meet us again one day. We make that decision here on earth, but our life belongs with the King. And I think that is what they understood, and that is why they were able to face this fire. And when their worship turned into a moment of trust, and God brings them out of this fire, something amazing around them starts to happen. It says, then Nebuchadnezzar said, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command. They were willing to give up their lives rather than to serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces and their houses be turned into piles of rubble. For no other God can save in this way. Now that is a little intense to end this off with, and I don't know if that's exactly what God intended to happen. But I think it is awesome to see Nebuchadnezzar's mindset change to realize like, oh, I got this way wrong. I saw the statue and I just thought of myself. I saw this dream of my greatness and I wanted to be greater than everyone else around me. But because of their faith and their worship and their willingness to step into the fire, they didn't step out and preach this long sermon about how faithful their God is and how everyone needs to change. But because of their actions that their worship brought on, people's lives were changed. The king who thought he was better than everyone else stepped in and said, no, I am nothing, because no one could save like their God. We're going to worship him, not me. I think our temptation can be to be the hero of the story, to place ourselves where Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were, and to be the heroes. But here's the reality, is that we are not the heroes. Because in all honesty, we've already bowed to other things. We have already decided to worship the idols of the world, most of us. But there was a guy who was willing to walk into the fire for you. And he didn't get rescued from the fire. He asked to. He said, God, if there's any other way, God, if you can take this cup away from me, do it that way, but your will be done. And Jesus, God in the flesh, stepped into the fire so that you didn't have to. He was willing to be the hero of the story, to face death. And that little part where it said, but even if God doesn't deliver me, well, guess what? God didn't deliver him from death in that moment. He faced death. He got the beatings. He got spit on. He got mocked. And he hung on the cross with his arms wide so that we don't have to face the punishment of sin anymore. See, the difference between Nebuchadnezzar and Jesus is that Nebuchadnezzar was this king who demanded worship. But when we look at the life of Jesus, we can't help but see that he actually deserves it. As he hung on the cross, as he stepped into the fire, the scariest day of his life, he decided to trust God because of a lifetime of worship. And I pray this morning that we see that and that we remember that we are not the heroes of our own story. That we are actually running from the finish line because Jesus said on the cross, it is finished. I've come and I've done my job. You don't have to face these things on your own because I'm doing it for you. The Bible tells us that our sin, our grief, our suffering, it was all left on the cross that day. And Jesus defeats death and walks out of the grave 3 days later. We get to serve a living God whose Holy Spirit lives in us every single day. I don't think there's anything else in this world that is worth worshiping as much as that. Let's pray. God, thanks so much for laying your life down for us. God, for giving us something that is worth running after. And God, I pray that when life gets hard, that we remember who you are, that we fall on our knees and our face in front of you and say that you are better than all the things. God, help us remember who you are and what you've done. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.